You're listening to Nightmare on Film Street. The current time is 6:66. Traffic is clear ahead from here to the afterlife, but it's hell outside. For the next hour, you're on Nightmare time. So, let's give a grave welcome to our hosts, John and Kim.
Hello again, fiends. Welcome back to Nightmare on Film Street. It's been a minute. We are hard at work on the new season of Nightmare on Film Street. Really excited. We got a lot of fun episodes cooking up for you guys. And in the meantime, I want to share this interview that we did with the producers of Companion, which is out in theaters this weekend. You already know these guys, JD Lifshitz and Rafi Margules. You might not recognize those names, but they are the producers, the co-producers and founders of BoulderLight Pictures, which made Barbarian, which made the Becky movies, the Vigil, like some of our favorite movies from the last 10 years. These guys are responsible for, and it was such a blast talking with them. It's kind of, it was like talking with some of your best friends, talking about just like what you want to see in movies. They are responsible for some of the most interesting movies, including Companion, which we've had a chance to watch and is an absolute blast. Just like a genre mashup that is really unpredictable. But as you'll hear in this interview, they are film fans themselves. They're producers, they're filmmakers, but ultimately they are genre fans. They have been movie fans since they were kids. Their process, their company ethos stems out of their own, frustrations or, wants, like what they wanted to see at the movies when they were kids, now that they're adults. And also we got some fun little talk at the end about how much we're all sick of trauma horror movies. So anyway, if you want to hear all about how Companion got made, what's waiting for you at the movie theater, and what's coming up in the future, stick around. This interview was a lot of fun. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, you want to quickly introduce yourselves to everybody?
I'm JD Lifshitz, co-founder and producer at BoulderLight.
And I'm Rafi Margules, co-founder and producer at BoulderLight.
Right on. So I know people listening to this are definitely going to be more familiar with the movies that you guys have made than maybe the production company name. You want to just give everybody a quick rundown on like some of their most recent hits?
Sure. Yeah. So we produced the Vigil, Barbarian, Companion, which comes out in theaters next week. Among many others, the Becky movies. Our first movie was a movie called Contracted, which we made when we first moved to LA. Rafi was able to raise about $55,000 to make a movie, and I was 19, he was 20, and we just made this movie by the seat of our pants, and it did very well for us and spawned a little franchise, and then we just built from there. And then the Vigil was really the movie that changed the game for us. Our company ethos is just about giving audiences, the best possible theatrical experience and just experience they can have with movies, and it's funny. We always say that our, new line in the 90s is part of like the goal. Right. Thank God we're very grateful that that's where our deal is now. At New Line, and that's who's releasing Companion with us. It's actually our first film on the deal, so we're very, very excited about it. And really, we're massive genre fans and just film fans in general. And so to get to do this and kind of do, to quote Quentin Tarantino, quoting Clive Barker, like subversion on a mass scale is very, just such a thrill.
So where does the name BoulderLight come from? Like, do you have is there like a fun story behind that at all?
Yeah, I know. It's funny. Sorry about that. The origin story, I would say, is like when we were kids, we each had like fake production companies in school we make camcorder movies on. So I had Boulder Comics Inc. Rafi had BoulderLight Productions. And at Mr. Broadway's Deli in New York, we I think on a napkin came to the conclusion when we were like 18 or 19 that we would just merge the not real companies to make one real company. And it's funny, we made a slasher movie together in 7th grade that we have a copy of in our office today. And the first credit, handwritten by like our 12-year-old hands, was New Line Cinema Presents.
When are you guys putting that out as a bonus feature on a disc? Damn, we got to see that.
That's a good idea. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, just like a contracted box set that also has that.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, I really would love to put our New Line logo in one of our New Line movies, maybe at the end. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that's like at the end credits, or maybe even for a sequel, they'd let us do it in the front credits. But I think that's it's such a weird, funny thing that we have that. You know?
Because it's not like we were shooting it on camcorders, like our dad's what I think it was my dad's camcorder, and we didn't have an editing software, right? So it's like we would just you'd shoot. If you were happy with it, you kept shooting, but if you didn't like it, you'd rewind and shoot over it, right? And we didn't, obviously, like I said, we didn't create the credits on like Final Cut or anything. So we would literally like bought like a big cardboard sheet from like Office Max, and we wrote out instinctually New Line Cinema Presents. It's like that was the brand that we associated with the movies that we loved as a kid, whether it was Seven or Dumb and Dumber, So it is quite funny that is where our deal is now, but it's no accident.
That is such a fun story. Like, when in the talks of getting that first look deal, did you guys bring that up?
I think it was pretty early. We met Mike DeLuca November of 20, who's the co-chair of Warner Brothers Pictures, and he, I'd been a fan of his for years. He wrote the last, in my opinion, John Carpenter's last masterpiece, and thus far in Mouth of Madness, and he wrote the Freddy's Nightmares pilot, among many others. And when he was president of New Line in the 90s, he made, again, Dumb and Dumber, Boogie Nights, Seven, so many great movies, Austin Powers. So when I met Mike for the first time, I think I said to him, I probably know your history better than you do. And he laughed. And I think we were very, very early on. I think we might have told it to him in the first meeting. We wear our fandom on our sleeves, right? I was a Fango obsessed kid, and I was actually it's actually part of my origin story. I was kicked out of my Hebrew school when I was 13, and I read in a Fangoria that Eli Roth checked his own MySpace messages, and I said, well, that's my ticket into the business. And so at 13 years old, I wrote Eli Roth a MySpace message, and he got back to me, and I couldn't believe it. And I did this with other filmmakers, and one of those filmmakers, actually, funny enough, was Jason Reitman, the director of Juno, and Thank You for Smoking. He sent me a signed postcard in the mail, which I thought was the coolest thing in the world at 14 or whatever it was. And then his daughter was actually our summer intern this past year, which was
wow.
Cool. But I remember I was a kid who, like, I met Bill Lustig, the director of Maniac, at like
wow.
At an establishment in New York, and like freaked out. I would take the train to Monster Mania and Fangoria Weekend of Horrors. And so, we've always been, it's always been kind of, we've always been just massive genre fans. And even when we're not doing genre movies, I think we take a certain sensibility and kind of a genre sensibility to those movies. I think we have a comedy coming out from A24 in a few months called Friendship. And that movie, it might not be a horror movie, but definitely has some of like the mischievous nature and kind of like, kinetic insanity of a genre movie. And I think that's something that really Mike DeLuca did. I think that if you look at, like, Seven might not be a horror movie, but it's certainly horrific, and Dumb and Dumber might not be a formal horror movie, but they're most definitely like psychopaths, and that movie is so much more I think subversive and weird than people remember. I mean, in the first act, they try to defraud like a blind kid by selling him a captive bird. Yeah. So they kill at least one person by mistake. So it's movies used to be unhinged, and we're really into that. And I think that I think horror, comedy, great movies oftentimes need to feel dangerous. And while horror was like our main obsession as a kid, I think that kind of translates into all of our favorite movies in many respects. Or at least
yeah. And so, yeah, like your ethos is sort of like subversion, like either it's expectations or genre and stuff. I always find having those conversations with people is tough when you're trying to explain what you're doing, because like how much of it is feeling and how much of it is formula. So like when you're approaching something that you're trying to develop, like what is it that stands out? What are you looking for that sort of says like, oh, this will be a BoulderLight picture?
It's a great question. And Rafi, I'll let you take this in a second. The only thing I would say is like, I'd say it's primarily feeling, right? We don't want to, I always say, like, I feel like we're at war with homogenization and mediocrity, right? And like I often say, like, I don't make movies for the Soho House, I make movies for 12-year-old me, right? I really want to make stuff that's like a saying that we have. It's just like, we don't, we want to make things that feel like they're true to what we love. And that's why we're a bit, every movie's an island. You don't want to kind of box yourself in. But Rafi, what would you say?
No, I agree. I mean, I think ultimately it does distill the gut, right? Like if our gut is telling us to do something, we're going to do it. That said, like we might love to see a movie like Tar, but we wouldn't necessarily make Tar, right? So I think that like our goal is to make big theatrical smash hits, right? So I think that I think that ultimately, like, our gut is the main thing, but our sensibilities are that of like of making big, broad commercial movies, right? But movies that have edge, have teeth, right? Like when, Barbarian is like, something we're known for, and that movie is extremely difficult to get made, right? But our we always thought it was a broad movie. We're like, this movie's really fun. It's really scary. It's really funny. It's really surprising. And it's really suspenseful. Isn't that why we go to the movies, right? It's like, who cares if it messes with structure? Who cares if it has unconventional, characters? So it's like, ultimately, if we think audiences are going to have a really fun time with this movie in a theater, combined with our gut, that's sort of what gets a movie greenlit. Because ultimately, like, we have to feel really passionate about something, because it's hard to get movies made, and if we don't feel we love this thing, because if we think something's broad but we don't love it, we usually don't pursue it. But if we do, it ends up fizzling out, because we're not ultimately, like, movies are hard to get made, and you really have to put your passion and weight behind it and really believe it.
Yeah, like it's you can fail doing something you hate, so like you might as well try to do something you're gonna like.
Yes. Well, I would say The Vigil was the first time we felt like we don't care.
Oh,
we felt like we were making movie. No. Now we don't care about The Vigil.
Oh yeah,
we don't care about how risky it is.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Prior to The Vigil, we were making movies that were, like, we'd made movies that were turning profits, but we didn't feel any sort of personal special connection to it. From The Vigil onwards, everything we're doing needs to be like somebody's favorite movie of the year. We want to be making stuff that, we want to make the stuff that everyone else is trying to rip off, God willing,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think The Vigil made definitely our top 10s. I think it made both our top 3s of the year. That movie rocked. And watching it too is just like, this is not unlike, a bunch of movies I watch every year, but like there is something different about it that completely makes it stand out. And you guys did an incredible job.
In my office, I have The Vigil
right on
poster. Yeah, that's
I remember we were pitching it as Ingmar Bergman meets James Wan.
I mean, that's not bad. I mean, that's for a very specific person. But I think we saw that at TIFF, actually. Yeah, like I think everybody in the audience went nuts.
Yeah, that was our first movie to get into a major film festival.
Yeah, good for you guys. That's pretty rad. So it sounds a lot like Subversion is, that's maybe like the overall principle now. But it kind of sounds like Subversion almost comes as an afterthought. Like, you guys are mostly just following what you think is going to be good, and then you find out from everybody else, like, oh, this is unlike anything that people normally make.
Yeah, I think it's like, we don't want to, we always think like the two things that make a bad movie are, is it boring or is it unauthentic? And if it is neither boring nor inauthentic, we're probably going to want to pursue it, right? And then it happens to be that a lot of the time those movies have similar things that, we're tickled by similar things. So the movies will be reflective of that. But yeah, exactly. We're not like, I think if you just try to be subversive for subversion's sake, it's hacky and people smell that. And so it's like, you just kind of gotta, to quote Lloyd Kaufman, quoting William Shakespeare, to thine own self be true.
The double quote. That's good. So like, what was it about Companion when you guys were first approached about it? Like, what was it that grabbed your attention about Companion?
Rafi, you want to take this?
No, you guys sent the script first.
So I got a mutual. I had known Drew through a mutual friend, and he we got the script, and you couldn't put it down. I mean, it was so, you could feel the voice in the writing, and obviously there's a twist in the first act that if you've seen the trailer, but there are so many twists in the movie, and the twists keep coming and coming and coming, and it's so fun and exciting. And it just didn't stop. And so, I called, it just felt like unlike everything else that's in the market. And it's talking about some similar things, but it's doing it in a totally unique way. You felt a voice. And I called our dear friend and mentor, Roy Lee, and I said, I think this could be a fun one for us to do together. We had just done Barbarian. It had been a great experience. And we sent it to Zach Kreger. And initially Zach was going to direct it. And then long story short, Zach had the idea, well, what if Drew directed it? And we made Zach a producer on the film and with us. Drew took over and just did a remarkable job. But what really attracted to us is, like, again, it was a story where it felt very true to the writer and was never boring. Like, you were, for the most part, you were just like on the page, which is very rare. You just felt yourself get wrapped up in both the narrative and the just kind of like voice that you were listening to.
It's constantly surprising. You, in the script and in the movie, you just never know where it's going to go. And as soon as you think you have it figured out, or as soon as you think like this is familiar territory, Drew does such a great job at subverting that. Like, one of the coolest things about his writing is just like his movies kind of like peel away like an onion, right? Like, the way the story unfolds is very unique. and his comedy is very unique. And if we can surprise the audience through story and through genre, like that's such a big part of the goal. And the movie's so fun and entertaining and feels current and cool. And there were a million reasons why we were excited about Companion.
Yeah, and it was
our first movie. It was the first movie that we put forward under the New Line deal to get green. And we did our deal end of 22, a couple months after Barbarian came out, and then moved into the office, not literally, but we moved in a few months later. But in January of 2023, submitted Companion and got the green light and went ahead and made it in the summer of when did we make it? In the summer of
that summer
23. Yeah. And we started in the early summer of 23, got shut down because of the SAG strike.
Yeah.
Which was a very large hurdle in what was ultimately a pretty drama-free, easy production. And then we finished the film at the end of 23 in the winter, which felt crazy at the time. You can't even tell in the movie. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like what's so cool about it also is like it has a lot of the energy of a midnight movie, which is awesome, but it's such a crowd pleaser. So it's sort of like I like to say it does what Barbarian does, but in a way that like you can take your whole family to. I mean, it's already, it's intense. It doesn't pull punches. It's very violent. It's sort of in the way that like Quentin Tarantino movies are movies that have gore and extreme violence and genre elements for people who don't necessarily respond to that sort of thing. Or like Get Out is a horror movie for people who don't necessarily like horror movies, but it still totally delivers for a horror fan, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was also such a, and it makes the job more difficult, but it makes the projects more exciting, which is like Companion's another movie, again, not unlike Barbarian, where we couldn't pitch it. We're like, just read it. Neither are just, a straight line. Like, and especially Companion, where like Companion's like, it's not a horror movie, but it is kind of a horror movie. It's not a comedy. You're not selling it as a comedy. It just touches on so many genres. So it's like, luckily we never even had to figure out a log line or a pitch for a Companion, because they said the first people, they said yes right away. So we have to figure out how to pitch something. But with this one, luckily we didn't have to, because it would have been extremely difficult.
It is really funny to hear that. I don't know, some of the hurdles you have there is like similar to what I would have reviewing it, because I'm just like, I don't know how to talk about this movie without giving everything away. Like the enjoyment of it is the ride. So like half the time with a movie like Barbarian or Companion, I'm like, just go check it out. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. You like movies, you'll probably like this one. It's
the best compliment.
It makes it tough.
Which is the best compliment you can give us, but always it just makes the pitching it harder, and it makes marketing harder too, right? Like the same reason why it was difficult for you to talk about Companion on this podcast is the same reason why it's like hard to crack. Well, like, how do you tell audiences about a movie like this without ruining it for them, but but while getting them to buy a ticket? And it comes with challenges, but when it works, it's all the more rewarding.
Yeah, no, like I was definitely sold on the teaser. The teaser is so great. I was worried. I'm like, how the fuck? What do I talk about? Like, so like my goal was like, I'm just gonna talk about like somebody dies and it gets weird. I'm not gonna touch any of the core of the movie. And then that new trailer came out. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm pretty good to just describe it as a Black Mirror episode or something.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that I always say it's like The Sixth Sense, where the fact that Cole sees ghosts is a twist, right? Like, if you watch The Sixth Sense, that is not revealed till about 45 minutes into the movie. Before that, it's the apartment is haunted, and then the twist is the boy is haunted, right? Sort of like Insidious. And then obviously there's a much bigger twist that comes in the third act. But I don't think, I don't think that knowing that Cole sees ghosts, obviously it's best to go into a twisty movie knowing as little as possible.
It's best to go into any movie knowing as little as possible.
That said, the first act, in Companion, the twist happens in the first act. There are many more twists to come. And I think that, what differentiates it, I hope, from like a episode of Black Mirror or The Twilight Zone or whatever, even though I love, I think Twilight Zone's like the greatest show ever, is the fact that like the movie really goes for it in a theatrical sense. The violence hits very hard. It's such a crowd experience. Like it plays, I think more than, I think when we were screening Companion for the first time, more than any movie we've done thus far, it plays like a rock concert. The audience gets so into it. And I think a lot in terms of like, genre audiences, and I say this as a member of the fan community, are the best at grassroots, right? We saw that in Barbarian. I remember being a kid, and being a member of like the Hatchet Army. You know what I'm saying? Of just like when a movie was coming out, Paranormal Activity had this, where it's like if we get behind a movie, we are better than any kind of like organized marketing department potentially. And you saw that. I mean, our friend Damien Leone had this Terrifier 3, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, and we really are hoping that genre audiences, this is the movie to bring to. I was saying this earlier today. It's like this is the movie to bring your normie friends to, because although it hits hard and delivers for a genre audience, it is like like a lot of the movies we've talked about. It's a genre movie that you don't have to be a genre movie fan to enjoy.
Yeah.
And then that helps, lull them into a false sense of security so you can trick them into going to Terrifier 4 with you.
Yeah, just bring that subversion into the recommendation. You're just going to subvert your friends' interests and get them to watch this.
Yeah, yeah.
So do you guys cut your own trailers, or is that something you have no control over?
That's a great question.
And do you wish you did?
No, that's a great question. I will say that Warner Brothers and New Line on Barbarian, we were very involved. On Companion, we were even more involved. I mean, certainly on that first teaser,
Sure.
Like the marketing department at Warner and New Line were so supportive. We've been involved. We've been so involved in the process, it's really been.
We were very involved in cutting that first teaser.
Yes. We want to be, right. We really care. I don't know anybody who cares the way we do, in the way that we do when it comes to a lot of this stuff. Besides, I mean, our filmmakers, hopefully, you know what I'm saying. But we're very, very, we really, really care about how everything is presented. And Rafi and I are very complimentary in terms of how we approach it. And so, we've been,
and that's from the development to the marketing, right? Like
the release.
A lot of people don't know what a producer does, including most producers. And we're every movie's an island. Some people have certain needs that others don't, and we try to never let our ego get in the way. But we're involved in development, to putting the package together, right? To trying to get the financing, to casting, to overseeing production, to overseeing post-production, and ideally through marketing and release strategy as well, right? Like
even after release, Rafi and I, a year after the Vigil came out, we worked to get the New Beverly screening, repertory screening with 35mm print. Even today we were talking about, okay, how can we get Q&As going at the Vista Theater in LA and beyond? How it's you want to,
we love this stuff. We love all aspects of. We love movies and we love movie making, and perhaps equally, right? Like
that's not at all a surprise to hear either. Like, I mean, from everything you're saying here and just watching your movies, like you can tell that there's care put into every decision along the line. How involved are you guys in casting? Because in terms of like subversion and stuff, like if that's the through line through the entire conversation, I mean, casting Bill Skarsgård in Barbarian was such a choice and the perfect one, and Jack Quaid here as well and in Companion as well, because like just putting those guys in that specific role already gives you an expectation of what you're going to expect, and so the rug pull is much better.
I will say our ultimate subversion is putting Kevin James as a Nazi in Becky.
Sure, yeah.
That was our apex subversion.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point, Rafi. I think that it's funny, we've become pals with both Bill and Jack, and they're both swell, really cool guys, and I think that for us, it's really, we work with the director to be like, who's the best person for this role? Who is the person that is going to get the audience excited, but ultimately, we want to make sure that everyone's rowing in the same direction. So you want to find cast members that are not only right for the roles and have the, quote unquote, kind of presence and value that you're looking for, but really want to make the same movie. We really want to make, our movies tend to be, we try to make our movies, we try to be responsibly reckless, which is to say, like, keep the budgets low enough that we can go wild. Mm-hmm. And so you want people who are in it to win it in that sense.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, like, if anything, like, it sounds like the subversive thing is just like allowing people to have, like, filmmakers to have a little bit more control over it, and I think it really helps, like with everything that you guys have worked on, because they all seem very, creatively driven, and they all have a unique voice. And it's really interesting that, you talk about every movie being an island, like looking at the patchwork of it. And when you see them all side by side, it's not a surprise to see that you guys have been involved in each of those projects, because they do feel like they are cousins in a way, but like their own unique projects.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I think that that's the thing is like we want to push our film, like we tell every filmmaker like make this movie like you're never going to make another movie, like put it all in the field, and it's like a lot of it is a lot of your job as a producer, or at least our job is not telling filmmakers to rein it in, but having them feel comfortable and supported enough to break bad, so to speak, right? Not literally, but just to go crazy and reminding occasionally, depending on the filmmaker and the circumstance, like it doesn't matter if you go into overtime in this specific day. Like a lot of people behave in a way that's like penny-wise and pound foolish, and ultimately like the audience, the whole time as a producer, you want to be focused on the end goal, right? You want to make sure you're never seeing the tree for the forest. And you're focused on like, what is the audience going to experience when they watch this movie? Because that is, nobody walks out of it. I mean, I think it's like a famous Billy Wilder quote, but it's like nobody walks out of the theater and goes, wow, they really made their days, and obviously our movies tend to be very, we tend to, like on Companion, we came in under budget, I would say, and we came in on schedule besides the strike, basically, mostly, that kind of set us back, but we tend to be very, very good about schedules and budgets. But we also build in a contingency so that like if we need that slush fund, it's there, and the money is on screen and you're feeling it, and everyone's rowing in the same direction because we're all betting on the upside together.
And going back to Subversion, I think once you see the movie, you'll appreciate what we did, or at least what we tried to do on our movie Friendship. The casting, it's our Tim Robinson movie, but casting Paul Rudd as sort of the straight man against Tim, or at least that's what you think it is at least we saw it as like a subversion on I Love You Man, where Paul Rudd is sort of, because they're very different movies, but they play on similar themes of male friendship, where Paul Rudd is sort of playing the Jason Segel character. So it's kind of like a flip in terms of what you would expect that character to do based on that previous movie. So I'm excited for you to see that as well, because that casting was also super intentional.
It's also an insane movie.
Well, I'm not really surprised when when you hear who's in it, or that you guys are making it, to be honest. So I mean, I've got a bunch of questions left, but you seem unique to answer this one question, at least. Like I talked to a lot of indie filmmakers and a lot of aspiring filmmakers, and like the common theme there with everybody is that everybody's got passion, and everybody has an incredible idea. Not everybody's great at sort of pitching that idea. Like, do you have any tips on, like, as people who are regularly pitching, or at least working in stuff that's hard to define, like how do you pitch an idea that is a little out there, harder to pin down?
I think, listen, Ernest God, I think, we always, part of wanting to like make the coolest stuff with the best people and the stuff everyone else is trying to rip off and like really focusing on originality is, I just want to feel like you're never quote unquote writing for the market. I think, again, I say this a lot, but like one of the biggest problems in the business is people making movies for executives instead of audiences. If what you're trying to do is uniquely you, and that should be felt in the pitch. Now, some people sometimes it's just hard to do public speaking. And then I would say like your script is probably your best foot forward, but I think it's just like, if you're feeling it, I think that if you're telling it over, like it's a great movie that you saw, because we've all, I think, tried to convince a friend to see a movie, and you start telling them like why it's so appealing. And if you do that, again, it's like at its core, all this stuff is just, you're telling a story. And if you can tell that story in a way, the way you would when you were a kid, that's why I specifically say like I make movies for 12-year-old May, because when you're 12, you're not jaded, and if you're not overthinking everything, and you're not deeply insecure about all this stuff, and it's very pure. And I think the best filmmakers, you feel that sense of like childlike possibility and wonder, and that is and that's I think the most attractive thing, because again, it feels raw.
And not that it's a filmmaker's responsibility necessarily to think about the market and the financial stuff, but I think we always appreciate, or at least, again, we could speak for our experience of just having a certain basic knowledge of the market. Like when you are taking out a project, just think like who is this for, right? Like who buys this movie? How does this movie get released? Does it feel like more of a Netflix movie? Does it feel like a movie that you want to get to Shudder? Does it feel like a movie that A24 could buy? Does it feel like a Universal, Warner Brothers, Paramount movie, right? Like kind of just thinking about a movie about a project as objectively as you can, as it relates to the market, and like how will the audience ultimately consume this movie, and where will they consume it? I think it's helpful to be thinking about that, so you can kind of talk about a project again from a business or market angle as in the most grounded, non-delusional way possible, right? Again, creatively go delusional, go nuts, write the craziest thing you can write. But from a market angle, when talking to producers and when talking to executives, just really think like, what is this movie? Who's it for? And how are they going to see it?
Yeah. Even going into every conversation, just play to your audience. And like as producers, I would think more so than directors and writers, like you guys probably have more of a sense of audience reaction. Like, are you noticing any trends that people are getting maybe bored with, or like newer trends that are cropping up that they are ripe to take advantage of? Because I know, like as an example, like trauma is really overdone, but it is pretty much the cornerstone of everything right now. And like I've been sick of it for a while, but I'm starting to see more and more people like at the movie theater talking about that kind of stuff. Like, is that something you guys are noticing too?
I'm so happy that I was doing the fake snore because it's so on the money.
It is totally on the money, and we are on the same page. Like, we are sick of trauma horror.
Well,
2 points on that. First of all, we did our version of that, which was the Vigil, right? The Vigil
in
is
2018, and it was sort of stale then, even though I don't think it's the movie because the movie's so good. But like, that's probably my least favorite thing about that movie is that it's trauma horror.
But it was still not done to death at that point. I would say the thing that started all this is probably The Babadook, which is a great movie, but that's like the OG trauma horror in terms of new quality indie horror, which obviously bled into studio horror. I mean, horror's kind of always been about many horror movies are about trauma. I just think it's never been as explicit as it is now.
And just boring and tired. Like, ultimately, horror is cyclical, right? I mean, I'm sure we all remember it's like, in the 90s, you had like the hip slasher movie. And then the early 2000s, you had the J-horror remake boom. And then you had the, quote unquote torture porn, which is really just extreme horror, right? The French extreme and the domestic extreme. And then you had like the found footage boon, and then the Blumhouse like horror boon, and now we have like what I gag when people say elevated horror, the elevated horror boon, which is the same thing as trauma horror boon. It's just like horror movies for people who feel like they don't like horror movies, right? They're apologizing for being horror movies, and that's like reprehensible to us. And we were very adamant, and I feel Zach would agree that like Barbarian is not an elevated horror movie. Barbarian is a great horror movie. It is a horror movie that is proud to be a horror movie. Right? It's not apologizing for being a horror movie. And we think the new frontier in genre is what we call neo-extremism, right? So I think in the same way that like in the mid 2000s, you started to get versions of like spooky ghost movies from the, the 50s through the 70s that were that were, kind of given the resources and budget and sheen of respectability that they maybe once didn't have, right? So you had a lot of movies, I think, and also movies that were inspired by foreign films like The Orphanage, right? I think a lot of the Conjuring boon of cinema is very, very heavily influenced by specifically The Orphanage, but a lot of those types of movies. And I think we're going to see that now with the extreme horror of the early 2000s, which a lot of people grew up on, right? And like we think that Alex Aja's Hills Have Eyes remake is a masterpiece, right? I think that taking the energy of those types of movies and giving them and in much in the way that like Quentin Tarantino takes like he'll take like Sergio Corbucci or even sometimes like Lucio Fulci style violence and make it palatable to a wide audience by like filtering it through a prism they can understand and giving it a sheen of quote unquote respectability, but maintaining the integrity of what it is. I think, and Spielberg did that with Raiders of the Lost Ark for the 50s serials. We're excited about being able to do that for the extremism cinema of the early 2000s. And I think movies like, again, Audition, Hills Have Eyes, even, and so I think that, and I think that we're going to see more and more of that. I think Barbarian touches on that. I think Talk to Me touches on that to a certain extent. Certainly the Terrifier movies are not touching on that, but they are touching to the desire for that, the hunger for extreme horror, right? I think the Terrifier movies are more in the classical mold than what we're talking about. We're talking about like kind of taking what makes those movies so special and then kind of like, putting it through a larger system, as opposed to like, I would say that, it's whereas I say I think Damien is carrying on a tradition that is very proudly what it is. And I again, he's a pal. And
I think Smile touches on that. I think that The Substance touches on that. I think that like studio horror or wide release horror rather, because these are not all studio movies, is getting a little bit more extreme. And that's really exciting. I will say I'm getting a little sick of the word bonkers. I feel like that's becoming the new elevated horror, which again, theoretically, I like bonkers. Like bonkers means surprising and crazy, but I think that there is a new thought. But and we're part of the system. But like I think that this idea that like you have to show people the craziest thing in the world, or like, look at this imagery, how messed up is this? I think that's also a crutch to a degree, right? Like, I don't think horror has to be absolutely unbelievably insane. It's okay when they are, and you know, everybody, a lot of people use the word bonkers to describe Barbarian, but I'm kind of sick of that crutch as well. The idea of like, you're never going to believe how crazy this is. You know?
Well, because ultimately it's like, I want horror movies to go hard, if it makes sense, right? Like, I don't want like the hacky, again, we've all seen gore fests that don't feel as impactful as Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which has really one scene of gore, right? Because ultimately it's a, you know, there's a recent, I won't say what it is, but I'm sure astute listeners can figure it out. There's a recent franchise sequel studio movie that came out.
You really narrowed it down.
Yeah, that has more kills than I've ever seen in a movie. And not one of them worked for me, right? Because none of them felt like it all felt petty and boring and like not, you know, whereas Audition has like one real sequence of violence, but it stays with you and it hits. You know, Barbarian is not such a gory movie, but when we show you gore, it is crazy, right? And so for me, it's more about like, it's more, again, just being true, being honest. And it's like, what does this movie need? What does this movie want? Because again, anytime you're trying to, you know, be a facsimile of what's already out there, I'm uninterested, right? I want to see things that feel the craziest thing you can be is original and unique to your own voice.
Yeah, and it really has to, you have to be pulling the threads on your own story. Like, it has to make sense with what you're doing. I think Companion's a great example of that, because there's logical steps that sort of box the characters in to a point where things have to get crazier and more violent and
bonkers.
Yeah, I was gonna say it as a joke and then I moved away from it. But you know, good on you guys for putting that up in IMAX too. Like, that's kind of crazy. I was very surprised to see that this is IMAX, because I know IMAX is limited, right?
We can't take any of that credit. I mean, that's
the distribution team at Warner Brothers.
Yeah, Jeff Goldstein is the head of worldwide marketing at Warner Brothers. Leveraged some of that. Sorry, head of worldwide distribution. Thank you, JD, at Warner Brothers. Leveraged some of that Dune Godzilla success, I think, to get us IMAX screens, because I think we might be, if not one of the lowest budget IMAX releases ever. And I will say, it plays great in IMAX.
Yes, please, it's big.
It plays great. It's the best I've heard its look and sound.
Yeah, the sound is definitely like the reason that I go to AVX or IMAX. AVX, I think, is what we call Dolby Atmos out here in Canada. Everything's got a different name out here, but it's all exactly the same technology. But yeah, like I am excited to go see this in the theater, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time to talk to me about it. Well, I should also first say that my co-host definitely wanted me to at least give a shout out to Woman of the Hour. She really enjoyed it. I know she'd be upset if I didn't at least mention that.
Thank you. And
that was a trilogy of films that shot by Zach Cooperstein. He shot The Vigil, he shot Barbarian, and he shot Woman of the Hour for us.
Oh, that's amazing.
And that was unconventional too. I mean, that might be seen as a more traditional movie because it's on Netflix and whatnot, but like, that was, at the time, that wasn't seen as a traditional true crime movie. It's a very unusually structured true crime movie in that, like, it's not a detective chasing down a serial killer. It's a true crime movie that like climaxes with two people going on a date.
Yeah. That was like one of the big. Unfortunately, I had something else to do, and I dropped her off at the theater to go see it. And like, those were like huge talking points for her afterwards. She also, back to like not weird, but like unexpected casting, like Daniel Zavato. Yeah. Loved him in the movie. Thought that he was a perfect choice for it. Like the kind of like dangerously charismatic character.
That was all Anna picked Danny Zavato. She knew right away that she wanted him.
Right on. That's great. So yeah, like we like to close out all of our interviews by asking people what their dream double feature would be at the drive-in. Either you personally or, something that speaks to BoulderLight Pictures, whatever you guys feel like doing. If you had control over a drive-in, what's your double feature?
I think that I always think the funniest double feature would be Crime Wave and Hudsucker Proxy, because they're sort of the inverse of each other.
Okay.
They definitely don't speak to what we're doing or what we're interested in. But I love both movies. And I think that, obviously one directed by Sam Raimi, written by the Coen brothers, one directed by the Coen brothers, written by Sam Raimi.
That's
both
fun.
Campbell, I believe. And just both really wonderful, underappreciated movies. Again, totally don't speak to what we do, but fun movies nonetheless.
And then for me, I've always wanted to see a double feature of Ed Wood and Mars Attacks.
Oh, that's fun.
Because Mars Attacks first being an extremely important movie in my childhood, and perhaps my favorite Tim Burton movie, feels like Tim Burton making his version of an Ed Wood movie, but on a tremendous irresponsible budget.
Yes.
And so just seeing those contrasted against each other would
Rafi, show your bonafide.
Yeah, and then I don't think this podcast is video, but here's my Martian.
Oh, right on. Yeah, you got one of those guys. That's perfect. I haven't seen Crime Wave, so I'm excited to check that out. And I had to build a movie shelf the other day, and I did come across my VHS copies of both Mars Attacks and Ed Wood, so I might do that double feature sometime soon. Oh, no, sorry, Plan 9. Ed Wood. Yeah, I also have Plan 9 from outer space.
Do a triple. By the way, feature would be Plan 9, Ed Wood, and Mars Attacks.
Yeah, bonus feature, Saturday only. Yeah, we can get it going.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. Really excited for everybody to check out Companion. Where can they see it? When can they see it? Tell everybody.
Please, yes. Everyone, every vote counts. Every dollar is appreciated. And seeing it in a big screen, showing support for original movies, theatrically, it means so much. And so it'll be in theaters everywhere, going next week, which is January 30th or 31st, depending on where you are. I believe, again, this is a genre movie you can take your non-genre fan friends to, and see it with the biggest crowd possible. And please tell your friends if you enjoy it. And if you don't tell them anything at all. I imagine you will enjoy it. And I hope you will. And thank you all for listening to us rambling.
Big thanks to JD and Rafi for hanging out and answering all of our questions. Companion is in theaters this weekend. Go check it out, especially before everybody on the internet spoils all the fun twists and turns this movie takes. Like I said, we've had a chance to check it out. It's a great date night movie. It's a great movie you can take your normie friends to, and we're really excited to go see it again this weekend. We'll be back again soon with more one-off episodes like these as time goes on. You can, if you need more Nightmare on Film Street between now and when the new season kicks off, you can head over to the Fiend Club. There's links for it in the episode description. You can get there by typing in nofspodcast.com/Fiend Club. That's where we're putting all of the reviews of movies like Companion, The Wolf Man, our What's Keeping Us Creepy episodes where we share what we've been watching. And as always, hang out with us in the Discord. You can chat with us. Social media is a cesspool. Let's all just hang out with the people we actually like. Your fellow fiends, your other horror fans. We're just sharing funny memes, sharing good movie recommendations, talking shit about stuff we don't like. You can get that at nofspodcast.com/Discord. And again, there's links in the episode description. Let us know what you thought of Companion. Really excited to talk to you guys about it. And we'll be back soon. Stay creepy.
It appears you made it out alive, but we'll get you next time. Help us to grow the horde. Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you subscribe. More terror can be found lurking on our website, nofspodcast.com. Until next time, stay creepy, fiends.